Welcome students to Principles and Practice of Management. In our today's class, we'll be discussing the second topic. We'll be talking about the evolution of management thought, which is our topic 2. I'll take you through the whole topic, but for greater detail and in-depth analysis, you can easily access the notes that are posted. Okay, so let's just go through what was required. So topic 2 is on the evolution of management. We have four major levels of management or major theories of management. We have the early management theory, or what usually referred to as the pre-classical theories. Okay, then we have the classical theories themselves. Now in the classical theories, we try and discuss what were the classics that are used for management. Then we have the neoclassical theories, which are rather new theories that have been suggested after people realized the classical theories maybe were not working for them, they came up with the neoclassical, and finally we have the early management theories. Okay, now let's get into the early management theories. Now, the early management theories, they are the ones that were used by empires. Think of the Persian Empire, think of the Roman Empire. They are the ways that they actually used to organize themselves. They are the way that they believed how bureaucracy could occur. For example, I remember the Roman Empire, there are the people that came up with the reason for democracy and so on. Then we also had the Chinese Empire. For the Chinese to be able to construct the Great Wall of China, they needed some level of management, because this was a project that took almost a number of hundreds of years, and this is not something that can be done with the click of a hand. Therefore, there was some level of management that was used under that. Then we have the pyramids that were the pyramids of Giza and all the other pyramids that have been constructed around the world. Think of the Egyptian pyramids, think of the South American pyramids, and so on. These were instances that showed that there had to be some level of organization for you to be able to do that. And also the Catholic Church, the Catholic Church was able to actually, it has a very well-defined hierarchy of authority, where you have the Pope, all the way the cardinals, the bishops, all the way to the congregation of the people that actually now attend the church. Now, the early management theories, it's just good to know them, to understand how they work, so that now when you get into the actual classical theories, you can see which one was used at whatever level. So the classical theories. Now these classical theories started during the second half of the 18th century. Okay? So starting around 1750s and so on. Okay? People started deciding, wait, there are other ways that you can actually come up with. We can come up with better ways of conducting things. So the classical theories, this was during the Industrial Revolution. During the Industrial Revolution. Now during the Industrial Revolution, people realized that we need some sophisticated ways to do our things. We need some ways that have to be done specifically in a certain way. And what did they do about this? So since the Industrial Revolution was more about the production of goods and services, the first way that came up was the administrative school. Now the administrative school was suggested by, the main contributor was someone usually called Henry Fayol. Henry Fayol is the person that actually came with the principles of management that we discussed in the first topic. Now, the administrative school really looked at how a company will work very well if the management is very good. That is, under the administrative school, Henry Fayol believed that if the management does their job very well, then the company itself will be able to kind of go out and grow in a huge way. Okay? So he actually wrote a book called the General Industrial Management, something of the sort. General Industrial Management, where he talked about the the basic functions of management, which were, he believed that a company had a commercial function, it had a financial function, a technical function, a management function, an accounting function, and finally a security function. All these are very well outlined in the notes. Therefore, Henry Fayol usually prefer him to as the, rather you can call him the father of management, because he actually came up with some really tip-top ideas, okay? So remember that he came up with the 14 administrative principles, all the way to spirited de corps and so on, unity of command and so on, the ones that we talked about in the principles of management. So we are saying he came up with the principles of management, and he also came up with what we are calling the major activities of management, that is the commercial function, financial function, and so on. So let's talk about the second classical theory, which is the scientific school. Now, the scientific school had a number of people that came in. Now, scientific school believed that business or management can be conducted, it can be conducted through facts and truths. That is, you see, science usually believes that things are have to be factual, that is, use facts to come up with reasons. That is, you do some experiments or you conduct some level of reasoning to come up with a specific theory. Now, we had the guys that came up with this, unlike Henry Fayol, who used to work at a factory, these were guys that actually conducted some experiments and so on. So the major proponents were Frederick Taylor, Henrik Gantt, and Lilla Frank. So let's talk about what Taylor said. Let's start with maybe Frederick Taylor. Now, this guy was around from 1856. It's good to think about the years, okay? Because the years make you realize when were people thinking like this? When were people thinking in this way? Anyway, so this guy was an engineer, and he came up with some scientific ways of doing things. Then we had Henry Gantt. Now, Henry Gantt was someone, he was a supporter of whatever Frederick Taylor said, because he was also an engineer, and he came up with something called the Gantt chart. The Gantt chart that used a way of explaining how management works. And finally, we had Lillian and Frank. It's called Lilla Frank because these two guys were a couple, okay? They were a couple. Lillian was married to Frank, and therefore they came up with actually Lillian was a professor in psychology, and Frank had his own company. Anyway, they were concerned with the waste. Actually, Lillian and Frank, they were concerned with the wastage that usually occur because of movement in the workplace. The amount of time that people usually take to maybe leave the office to go and greet their friend and so on. So that's what they majorly discussed. Finally, let's go to the bureaucratic school of thought. Now, in the one thing you should note about the bureaucratic school of thought is that people realized, not people, but rather Max Weber realized that all the theories that have been talked about, they were really focusing on how management should do things, how management should do things. And therefore, there was the possibility of the abuse of power. And therefore, Max Weber came and decided, instead of having a theory where you are talking about how management should conduct themselves, because if you teach only the management how to conduct themselves, there's the possibility of some of the power may be abused. And therefore, he came up with something that was rather hierarchical. That is, he said that there has to be some level of bureaucracy where not only one person is giving orders to everyone, but you should have different levels of management. And therefore, he believed that there had to be something called the division of labor. Labor had to be able to be divided according to people, so that people may actually show their best out of whatever they were doing. He required that there to be some level of technical expertise. He didn't want people. Max Weber realized that if you let one person make all the decisions in a company, there's the possibility of them conducting nepotism, corruption, and so on. He talked about the need for that level of accountability. So that was all under the classical theories. Let's now go to the neoclassical theories. Now the neoclassical theories realized that these earlier theories, the classical and the early management theories, or the pre-classical theories, they really thought of people as they thought that people were machines, things that just have to do work. But however, under the neoclassical, they realized the need of treating people as independent beings that had their own psychology and physiology. Therefore, this school of thought really looked at the physiology and the psychology that a person or a group of people usually portray in an organization. Because guys are not machines. What may be working very well for this group of people may not be working very well for another group of people. Therefore, the neoclassical theorists came up with two ways. They came up with the human relation and the behavioral school of thought. The human relation school of thought. Actually, when you're calling them schools, remember they are schools of thought, or the way people actually think. So let's talk about Elton Meyer and the experiments he conducted. Now, Elton Meyer was a professor, and he conducted an experiment where he used some ladies that were working in a sewing machine, a sewing company, a company that does some threading and makes some garments and so on. And he realized that some of the conclusion was that the emotions that people usually have at work are actually a better way of getting the best results out of things. That is, unless you are able to look at the emotional chain reaction that usually occurs, because if the boss is angry, it boils down all the way to all the workers that are working in that company. And realize that informal or unofficial working groups, the guys that are friends after work are the people that are actually able to do more work outside of work. That is, they have their output is much better. He realized that when the management empowered the people, it actually helped them. Then we had McGregor's theory X and theory Y. Now, remember you're saying that these theories look at the psychology of people. Now, according to McGregor's theory X, he believed that people are generally lazy and they have to be pushed. It was rather a pessimistic. We could call it a pessimistic approach, because it believed guys were lazy, they had to be pushed, they had to be threatened in order to do whatever they were supposed to do. And the theory Y was an optimistic one, where he said people are generally hardworking. People generally love their work. Now, you see, these two theories can apply in different contexts, because if you think about the theory X, this is the best theory to use maybe when you're working in a company of engineering, an engineering company and so on. The optimistic one is good when you're doing something such as marketing, because we want people to be able to think on their own and so on. Then, that's all for today. We'll continue later.